her leg. She bit her tongue, smothering the impulse to tell him off, but her glare must have been sufficiently irate, because he offered a slightly contrite look and motioned for her to wait. His gaze turned inward, his face pinching in concentration. A faint, bluish glow, tinged with orange at the periphery, rose around him in a rapid swirl. He inhaled through his teeth. A sharp intake that drew both air and magic, Vera guessed, and all that remained was the faint shimmer of hot air. Care to warm up? He motioned with his hand but kept his eyes averted, trained on the river, a practical offer. The awkward intimacy would be epiphenomenal. The voice of reason cautioning her that this was one horrible idea didn't stand a chance against the categorical imperative of survival, so Vera scooted closer, and then closer still, until her back was against the Dunmer's chest. He brought his legs up, his thighs bracketing her hips, and then he leaned forward, bringing his arms around her and clasping his hands loosely over his knees. He was going to painstaking lengths, not to make more contact than strictly necessary. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a few moments. "Day!" Vera tried to muffle the sigh of pleasure at the blissful warmth, mostly out of sympathy for Demon Chops' visible discomfort. Every line of his body was as tense as a drawn bow. Once her back began to dry, a ragged sigh escaped her lips, and the Dunmer went very still, his own breath hitching before he covered it with a cough. Did Unnar make it? The last she saw of the Nord was his spectacular and ill-fated return to consciousness, damaged but alive, not by his efforts. But who am I to judge? You'll find that our employer is remarkably difficult to kill. Did you get the sword at least? We did. At that. I do hope it was worth it. The lazy drawl was back. I doubt it was. Vera wiggled closer, trying to get her legs dry now that her back was toasty. Ciro grumbled an inarticulate curse. Unless you'd like the flame cloak to incinerate you, I recommend you keep still. She stifled a snort and allowed herself to sag against him, the exhaustion washing over her like a tide. Oh, relax, will you? He was practically thrumming with tension. I've seen this countless times. It'll pass if you wait it out. You can't argue with your lizard brain, so don't waste the effort. I beg your pardon? Demon Chops sounded distinctly acerbic. Shit. And now, she had managed to offend him. So much for talking straight and making this less awkward. Something about lizards and dark elves. She'd read about it, but the effort of dredging up that particular historical tidbit felt insurmountable at the moment. She was warm, finally, and her eyelids suddenly felt full of sand. Let me rephrase. Well, she mulled it over. Surely this wasn't his first rodeo either. The arousal, fight or flight or fuck, the 3FS. Judging by the state of your face, you narrowly survived something pretty unpleasant. Your body is going to cycle through instinctive responses depending on what's available. She rubbed her eyes. It passes, as I'm sure you know. For a few seconds, she thought he'd bolt, or tumble down the denial path and make things even more awkward between them. Without armor, you couldn't exactly argue with biological symptoms without sounding like a bigoted fool. But the Dunmer didn't argue. Instead, he exhaled through his teeth, his breath ruffling Vera's hair, and some of the tension drained from him. She felt him shrug. Spoken from experience, I take it? His usual irony was there, but also genuine curiosity. As I said, she stifled the yawn. Pretty normal response. Just your body reminding you that you're still alive. Consider my memory suitably jolted then. That being said. He hesitated. If we are to work together, I am not in the habit of mixing business and pleasure. It would have been convincing, too, if his arms around her hadn't tightened, his forearm brushing against the underside of her breasts. Fuck. Vera's mouth went dry. The sweet, achy heat pooling in her lower belly had very little to do with the fire cloak magic, or whatever it was called. Hard to miss the not very subtle irony, considering her earlier lecture about the naturalness of this very response. Or maybe it really was time to get a lover. Someone not overly complicated, without the baggage of a demented Nord employer with suicidal tendencies. Preferably someone with the added benefits of lending protection against Markarth politics. Wasa. A practical arrangement, 2 pigeons, 1 stone and all that. This, whatever it was not going to be practical in the slightest. Just business works for me, partner. Ciro chuckled a little darkly, but he didn't let go. Instead, he leaned forward, his lips inches from her ear. Warm enough yet? Oh, fuck. The blasted Dunmer certainly knew how to weaponize his voice when he felt like it. Vera shook her head, chuckling despite herself. So that's how it's gonna be. Wine. Let's pretend you won this round. Did I? Beneath the sarcasm, a hidden edge, like a blade tucked into the cuff of a boot. Whoop, not practical at all. Warm enough. Let's see where we landed. Ciro allowed for the spell to wane to mildly warm, then to barely tepid, then, finally, to nothing at all. He still radiated heat. Not the magical variety, just the regular difference in base body temperature. And it made Vera all the more reluctant to disentangle herself from her otherwise comfortable seating arrangement. Now that the more immediate threat of hypothermia was temporarily averted, the aftermath of her tumble in the river was beginning to catch up with her. Her ribs ached. The skin on her stomach, where she had scraped against the underwater rocks, was starting to smart, and the spot on her calf where something had hit her on the way to the dinghy throbbed like an electrical burn. An assortment of miscellaneous bruises and pulled muscles collected less memorably was also making itself known. The Dunmer didn't seem in any particular hurry to let go of her. She cast a glance to the skies. Another hour to sunrise. Where were they exactly? There was that telltale dip in the cliffs across the river. A sharp drop in the shape of a W, but lopsided on the right, which meant that they were most likely a bit north of Blind Cliff Cave. It was pure luck that they hadn't gone over the rapids. Where is Unnar, by the way? If Ciro had gone fishing for her, the Nord must have been functional enough when the boat reached shore to get himself to safety, sleeping it off on the bedroll just. He motioned with his head. Up there. He'll be good as new. The fetcher? Give it a few hours. No need to fret about your betrothed. He shifted, settling in for the long haul. We might as well kill time until sunrise. Not much we can do until then, anyway. Vera snorted. Pragmatic, aren't you? He shrugged. Much as I wouldn't mind watching you run around half naked, I'd rather not keep wasting energy on the fire cloak to keep you from freezing. You won't be very effective until I have enough magic to dry out your armor. Vera leaned back against him and craned her neck, trying to get a look at his expression. One red eye met her gaze. The other one had shut completely with the swelling. His earlier tension was gone, and he seemed more relaxed, perhaps not outright comfortable, but too exhausted and battered to bother with sudden movements or with his usual vaguely threatening take on flirtation. She took inventory of his injuries. Large hematoma with severe edema over the left eye. He'll be lucky if the cheekbone wasn't fractured. Busted lip. 3 gashes on the right side of his face that looked like claw marks, shallow but ragged. The bottom one was oozing. A long, narrow burn over the left temple. Further down, a mottling of bruises that disappeared under the collar of his shirt. No open wounds. Interestingly enough, at least none that she could see. Either he had used some of his magic to heal himself, or how exactly did you manage to escape the Forsworn? They couldn't have possibly attacked them head-on and prevailed. Besides, the Dunmer's injuries weren't consistent with battle. She swallowed. Nope, torture was more like it. He shifted, prodded at his lower lip, made a face, and returned his hand to where it was resting before. His fingers clasped together over his knees, his arms in a loose embrace around her ribcage. "How do you think?" "I think you tricked them somehow. That's how I would have gone about it anyway, if I was stupid enough to try that kind of stunt." What started as a chuckle ended with a none too flattering invocation of Shiogura's beard as the Dunmer's less than optimal physical state protested his amusement. "I'm beginning to see a pattern of avoiding stupid stunts. Want to tell me where you're really from, Outlander? While we have some time on our hands." Vera forced herself to remain still, overriding the instinct to bolt. "My friends call me Vera, or V. Either way, shorter than Outlander, saves time, that sort of thing." "Oh, is that what we are?" He didn't move, but his tone reacquired its mocking edge. "Friends, damn it. It really was the voice, wasn't it? Partners, if you prefer. Until we can get ourselves back to Markarth, I'm stuck with you two. Safety in numbers, you know how it goes." "If it's safety you're looking for, you've made a poor choice of associates, V." He sounded it out, trying it for taste. "Or whoever you really are." In the myriad of possible questions, Vera decided to opt for the most obvious one. If Demon Chops kept bringing it up, the chances of him just dropping the topic in the future seemed slim to none, so damage control might as well be done now when his defenses were lowered. "What makes you think I'm not who I say I am?" He kept quiet for a moment, perhaps organizing his thoughts, or perhaps just relishing the drawn-out silence. A fellow with a healthy enjoyment of pregnant pauses. As far as Vera was concerned, there were worse vices. "You are new to Markarth, with no allies or wealth to help keep you afloat. So much so that you agreed to take a dubious job for the promise of coin. Not that much coin either, if we're being truthful. From what I've seen of you so far, you move through the city like you do through the wilds. And you might look like a Breton to Unnar, but only because he's stuck on size. Breathe. You're fine. He's not your enemy at the moment. Pick your battles." The lizard brain really wasn't very receptive to arguments. "How do I move?" He made a vague noise, something between a chortle and a "You don't turn your back on a room. The first thing you do when you enter a closed space is to look for the exits. You eat like oblivion itself is about to swallow your dinner." He punctuated his enumeration with little taps of his thumb against his wrist. "From what I've seen of Markarth fashion, you keep your hair too short." Vera snorted in irritation. "Sero, I don't think we know each other well enough for you to complain about the length of my hair." Another one of those non-committal chuckles. "I don't recall complaining. My point is that this..." He brought his hand up slowly, palm open. No weapons, no threat there, and rested it against the back of her head. And then he curled his fingers through the short, cropped strands and gave a tug firm enough to send a tingle down her spine. "Couldn't be used against you. Not unless someone got close enough. Or..." Another very pointed chuckle this time as he removed his hand. "If you allowed it." Vera repressed a whole body shudder. Oh, but the guy was trouble. Instead, she made herself shrug, ignoring the tingling and the memory of his hand in her hair and that just so yank. It's practical, easier to clean. Try elbowing your way through the Markarth public baths next time you're in town. Are you offering a guided tour? Ah, this game again. Oh, I'm sure Unnar can wash your back when he wakes up. Or is that not part of your business arrangement? The Dunmer barked a laugh, dry and gravely, and then muttered an ow followed by a few choice words, but kept cackling despite the discomfort. It isn't. Are you asking whether the position is open? Vera smirked. They'd already established the terms. From there, verbiage was fair game, and he'd been on the offensive so far, so turnabout and all that. Only if it's a very industrial scrubbing. Wouldn't want to mix business and pleasure, yeah? Then again, one does need a partner to get to the hard-to-reach places. She felt him shift behind her, the muscles in his forearms cording with the strain of consciously breathing through the tension. Gotcha, fucker. Two can play this game. Not my first rodeo either. Since you're curious about Markarth customs, they do have this great thing. They do with juniper oil. Used to be dwarven oil. Until Bothala finally got folks to realize it's toxic. If you can afford it, which I'm guessing you can, what with looting your way through the countryside. It's... Vera moaned, throaty and low and dark with promise, and then she bit the inside of her cheek to suppress a snort when demon chops hissed and scooted backwards, putting distance between them. There's another one that uses honey. Something about the mountainous environment, I think. Sharp on the tongue at first, almost salty, but if you take it in, the sweetness hits the back of your throat. Would you rather hear about that one? He spat out something in Dunmary, wiped his hands on his knees before bringing them back around, apparently utterly unwilling to concede so much as an inch. Azura's wisdom, woman. Enough. He swallowed audibly. His brogue got thicker when he was flustered. Good to know, for future reference, if this was going to be some kind of partnership. However temporary and however misbegotten, she might as well learn his tells. We'll pretend this round goes to you, shall we? I don't think so. I won this one fair and square. We're still talking about hair remedies, right? He sat in silence for a moment, and then he laughed, an unguarded, self-deprecating guffaw that made their little game feel so much less game-like. He leaned forward, his chest flush against her back, but his arms around her remained purposefully loose. Impressive, evasive tactics while we're on the subject. The cloak of irony was now firmly wrapped around his words. Will we be playing a guessing game then? If so, I have another puzzle I'd like to unravel, based on your reaction to me during our first